Now, you cannot say we didn't warn you. Evoker is getting a third spec. It's kind of like 99.99999999999% confirmed that we will have a third spec. And listen, we already have a video on the initial data mine details, which I'm not gonna go through all over again. You can definitely check it out on our channel. But what we're gonna be looking at today is some new data mine data, voice lines, and a bunch of implications that will probably happen, definitely happen, 100% happen in 10.2, giving the evokers the third spec. Essentially what happened is now we actually have the audio files for some new Neltharion voice lines, which are actually really great, and I will leave you guys to delight in what the voice says right now.
You three shall be the examples all Drakthir will follow. Sarkareth, my devastator. You shall rend your foes with the powers of the red and blue dragonflights. Viridia, my preserver. You shall heal our allies with the grace of green and bronze dragonflights. And Emberthal, you will wield the essence of the black dragonflight to augment all those around you with my power. By my command, kneel and obey.
And man, if these don't give you the goosebumps, I don't know what will. There's so much to unpack here. First of all, Neltharion essentially addresses 3 different evokers by their actual spec. It calls Sarkareth my devastator, obviously a reference to the devastation spec that evoker has, which is obviously really cool. And Viridia, the preserver, which is obviously the preservation spec that evoker also has. And finally, Emberthal, which it doesn't have like an actual title, but what it says is, and I quote, "And Emberthal, you will wield the essence of the black dragonfly to augment all those around you with my power. By my command, kneel and obey." Now, I feel like this is a little bit of a cope because the line could have also said Emberthal, my augmentor, or whatever the spec would be called, because obviously we don't know yet, but it's clearly designed to be something totally different. Obviously, this whole dialogue segments into 3 different identities. There's Sarkareth, the Devastator, Viridia, the Preserver, and Emberthal, we're gonna call it the Augmentor. And we did touch upon the augmentation style, because there is also like a quest line and some text referring to the concept of boosting your allies. But now we probably know for sure. Now, what is this augmenter? Obviously, we can probably speculate and infer a lot. We don't really know yet. There's possibility number 1. Augmenter is a totally different role in World of Warcraft. It can be slightly a support, slightly a DPS, a combination of both. You are supposed to augment those with your power. Probably infusing their DPS, infusing their tankiness, giving them more heal. This kind of sounds like a support style role. And when you think of support, you might think to what could be number 2, a healer spec. A second healer spec more focused towards the support spec, where you probably won't rely too much on actual resolving, the HP bar of a target by, filling it with healing. But instead you can probably alter it by probably adding damage reduction, reversing time, although this is supposed to be kind of like a black dragonflight style of magic. So I kind of have my serious doubts that it is going to be a healing spec. Third thing that what it could be is an actual support spec, which is not something that we have. We have tank healer DPS, right? Or tank healer melee DPS, range DPS. Support can be the 4th spec in World of Warcraft. Now, support would probably make the most amount of sense based on what we know that Emberthal and let's say the 3rd evoker spec could do, because there is no infrastructure to support that. What is a support spec? Will it deal damage? Will it heal? Probably not heal, because otherwise it would be just a healer. Will it deal damage? Everybody pretty much does damage. Okay, is it going to DPS? No, it's going to be a support. What does that mean? Well, you're probably going to have spells akin to what we know from PI, Power Infusion. Likely not individually oriented. It's probably going to be like party-wide or raid-wide. I'm imagining something like boost everybody's haste by 5% for 10 seconds, or make everybody's 3rd attack deal a critical strike or whatever, right? This is kind of like the boost style mechanics, increase the movement speed, refresh some of their cooldowns. Like, to be fair, with the concept of the augmenter, the sky's the limit in terms of what design this could actually have, but the fact of it being a fourth role, fourth style of spec in WoW is going to be very, very weird and also a little bit unlikely, because what this means is that how do we incorporate this into our raids, into our dungeons? Will we have 6-man dungeons? Will we have 5-man dungeons? Will this replace one of the DPSers in our groups? Will this replace the healer in our groups? Will this replace the tanks? I kind of doubt it, although the whole thing with Black Dragonflight was kind of supposed to be a tank. Now, fourth could also be a tank, although I hardly see this happening also, but tank would probably make more sense in terms of any other spec. So before we have a DPS or a healer, I would probably see this more as a tank, since Black Dragons are supposed to be like defensive in nature and the protectors, right? Now, we know that it's not going to be a tank, at least not in the, you know, original concept, in the traditional sense, because you're clearly referred to as somebody that augments and boosts your allies. And this goes into potentially the fifth point that we could make about this. Is the Wowhead article actually does a good job at summarizing the fact that Black Dragons throughout the history of WoW, they have been the scientists of the Dragonflight, let's say. They've experimented with a bunch of stuff. Obviously, Neltharion experimented with all sorts of things, creating the Dragthier. Nefarious have experimented with, I think it was in Cataclysm, with the laboratory and all of the chromatic Dragonflights and all the chromatic dragons that he did. And it's not just the Cataclysm, but also in classic WoW. So they have that for them. However, where I fail to see this being generalized is that these are the only Black Dragons that we know that have experimented with whatever passes for genetics in World of Warcraft. So I don't see how this is representative of the actual Black Dragonflight aspect, since outside of the Neltharion family, we don't really see any other Black Dragons experimenting with anybody else. They're just dragons, they deal damage, they protect things, right? That's kind of what we know most of all. But sure, if they want to retcon their, let's say, representation within Warcraft as being the scientists, then sure, that would make sense for it to be an augmenter. Now, this could also turn out to be an actual augmenter spec. This could be the third spec. And this will definitely come in 10.2 because it cannot come in 10.1. First of all, from the previous video, which I recommend you also watch for a little bit of tidbits because I'm not going to cover all of it again, we know for sure that the Dragthier and Emberthal in this case will unlock the power of the Black Dragonflight through following through the story of 10.1, most likely releasing Adamantia, I think her name was, the dragon that you probably saw in Forbidden Reach, that is encased in some weird crystal type stuff where she feels like she's frozen. Apparently, she's supposed to be the source of the Black Dragonflight essence that was supposed to be poured into the Dragthier that wasn't poured. Initially, we thought it was because Neltharion prohibited it, but judging by the voice lines, it doesn't really feel like that's the case. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, because we have to, you know, kind of unlock the story and finish the chapter, most likely the culmination of this is at least after Sarkareth's defeat in Aberrus. Whether we kill him or not, we don't know yet, but we definitely defeat him and unlock the future part of the story. But looking at how the patches have been rolled out for 10.0, where we had 10.0.5 and 10.0.7 that actually gave us a new zone with new quests and new story, it's not entirely unlikely that the story for the third Evoker Spec will still happen within the second season, maybe 10.1.7, let's call it. However, I still doubt that even though we complete the quest, maybe you'll be made aware that you have a third spec. I think they will probably, at the very most, put it into the game, but make it inaccessible. Probably like a grayed out specs, like this is not the time, right, for respecking, and it's probably going to be unlocked in 10.2. The main reasons for this is probably because of meta and community. Where do you fit an extra spec middle of the season when everybody has their teams progressing through the raid or pushing keys or anything like that? It will probably mess a lot of stuff up, not to mention the balance implications that we'll have. Middle of the season, putting a whole new spec into the game that nobody has ever tested yet at all, I would be entirely surprised. So what I believe is that it will be made available for people to know about its existence in 10.1.7, let's call it, and then in 10.2 it will be released to the general public, and it would be amazing because, okay, we will have a third Evoker spec. It's pretty much confirmed, close. Like, if they go back on this, this is like a major teaser that it's kind of gonna be a little bit silly. However, past this, what this could mean for World of Warcraft is huge, because we have never had a spec added to a class in the middle of an expansion. Not to mention that we were kind of like in a cadence where every second expansion we have a new class. And we skipped that for Shadowlands. It was supposed to be in Shadowlands, but now we have it in Dragonflight. Not only do we have it in Dragonflight, we have an extra spec added to it. Obviously, that's awesome for Evokers, but that could also mean more specs for other classes as well. A 5th spec for Druids, I don't know, a 3rd spec for Demon Hunters, those Rage Demon Hunters that you've been wanting for so long. Maybe we will have a Lich spec for maybe the Death Knight, or maybe the Warlock, like who knows. The simple fact that they're willing to do this means really cool things to come in WoW's future, because it definitely unlocks the gates to more creativity, more things to be tested out, more risks taken by the devs to do unconventional things that can just make the game explode, because this is really cool. We never had this before, and Dragonflight with like every little patch seems to be getting better and better and better. But what do you guys think? What do you think this 3rd Evoker spec will be? Will it be a DPS that can augment your allies, a healer that can augment your allies, or maybe a tank, or maybe a totally different spec entirely? Leave a comment down below and let us know. Thank you, patrons, for supporting the content that we do. We love you guys very much. For anybody that wants to support us a little bit more, the Patreon link is down in the description. See you next time. Bye-bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.